This is Andre Damon with the World Socialist website. We're here with David Walsh, the WSWS's arts editor, to talk about his new book, The Sky Between the Leaves. So David, thank you very much for joining us today. What can you tell us about this book? How did it come together, and what are some of the main themes and topics covered in it?
Well, the book is made up of reviews of several dozen films, interviews with critics and directors, essays, as well as pieces from the various film festivals we've attended over the last 20 years. It's an attempt, it was an attempt to select from from hundreds of pieces, what we thought were the most interesting, obviously, most typical, most telling. There are the career studies of people like Robert Altman, Ken Loach, Roman Polanski, interviews with various critics and directors, including Kiarostami and Mike Lee, critics like Andrew Saris and Robin Wood. There are comments, obviously critical comments, on Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, on Martin Scorsese's The Gangs of New York, a whole range of things. We try to cover both American and European and Asian cinema as competently and as carefully as we can.
Could you speak a bit about the World Socialist website and why it focuses so much on questions of art and culture for a political news website?
I think the basic answer is that we see art and culture as critical to the development of consciousness of the population, the development of its sensitivity, its compassion, its knowledge, its ability to fight, its opposition, its outrage, its resistance, and the general growth of knowledge and culture in the society. And that's been the case, that's been true of every major social transformation, every great social uprising in history. It's been connected to profound changes in the artistic and cultural consciousness of the population.
How would you characterize the state of contemporary filmmaking?
Well, we're very critical, obviously in many ways, although we don't see it as a result of personal weaknesses. A good many of the reviews are written more in sorrow than in anger. It's not a question of individuals' failures so much as problems in social development, problems in historical development. If art is about life and cognizing life, representing life in imagery, then our criticism is that American films in particular, but global cinema, has done a very poor job over the last 20, 30 years. I think it's the weakest period in the history of filmmaking. In the 1930s and 40s, there were films that captured in some way critical social situations, critical social relationships, the character of American life. For example, speaking of American films now, for example, Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, or the Henry Fonda character in Grapes of Wrath, or of course the wealthy man, Citizen Kane in Horse and Well, Citizen Kane. Those figures, those characters are indelible. They remain in our memory, they remain in the culture as much as a Hamlet, a Lady Macbeth, a Scrooge, because they manage to concentrate within them, in the form of imagery, powerful representations of life. Okay, ask yourself the same question over the last 30 years. Is there any similar figure who stands out? And I would say that there is not, and that's one of the critical proofs of the crisis of filmmaking.
Do you see some positive signs in the film world?
Certainly. It's not our view that this sort of spark of human genius has gone out. There are extraordinarily talented people working in every medium, including film, including cinema, and you see glimpses of brilliance in a whole number of films. And certainly there are interesting things being done. We've written last year about Lincoln on the one hand, and sort of Zero Dark 30 and Django Unchained on the other, as two sort of poles in the situation. I think there are interesting films. There are interesting films being made in Europe, in China, elsewhere. But it's our view that a critical issue is a change in the whole social atmosphere. That a mass movement in opposition to what exists will change the atmosphere, will scatter the clouds of skepticism and pessimism, so to speak, and create a very different atmosphere. That's the biggest problem in our conception over the last 30 years, is the social quiescence, the social stagnation has found reflection in film. Film is very sensitive to popular movements. It's a mass form, and it's involved with mass society, mass production.
As a film critic and author, what are some of the main themes that you've sought to communicate to your readers?
As a socialist film critic, we're trying to sensitize our readership, our readers, to social problems, but also to human personality, to human complexity, to make people think and feel, if this doesn't sound too pompous, in a more complex and intense way, to think more deeply about their own lives, about their own social situation. The problems of art, what those problems are bound up with, the problems of art in relation to the problems of social development, what's the character of the 20th century, what are its big issues. Art at the beginning of the 20th century had great optimism about social transformation. The 20th century was an incomplete century, a century of uncompleted struggles. In a certain sense, there's been a cultural regression, but we don't see that as something absolute. It bounds up very much with the problems of social life.
Could you explain the title of the book?
Yes, it comes from a poem by André Breton from 1934, and it's a poem, the first line is in the beautiful half-light of 1934. And I interpret it to mean looking through the immediate obstacles to a somewhat brighter and broader horizon. That's how, whether he meant it that way or not, I don't know, but that's how I interpret it. I don't think there's any question but that the greatest films lie ahead, and the greatest artwork lies ahead.
David, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. I would encourage everyone to buy and read The Sky Between the Leaves, which is available right now on Mehring.com. Thank you.